Hello there. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I know we normally do this live stream on Monday, but this next guest that I have is super special, and I was psyched to have him on the show. So I made some rearrangements to my own schedule just so I could have him be here. Welcome to the Communication 24/7 podcast, where we communicate about how we communicate. I am your host, Jennifer Furlong. One of the reasons why I asked Kevin Palmieri on the show today is because, well, he's an all around awesome guy. But beyond that, he's a motivational speaker. He is co host of his own podcast, Next Level University. He is founder and CFO. He has a lot of fantastic experience, and I know he has a lot of wisdom that he can share with us. So if you are looking to not be inspired, to not be motivated, to not figure out how to go through that obstacle, around it, over it, or under it, then I invite you to listen to another episode. But if you are in the mood to be motivated, you want to be inspired, and if you are stuck in some way and you're ready to level it up, then I invite you to stay, because this is going to be a fantastic conversation, and I am super excited to have you on the show. Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I love that. And also thank you again for the flexibility. I understand as a podcaster, we like to stick to our schedule, but I'm grateful that you are flexible and you and I are able to talk. I appreciate that more than you know.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I was a guest on someone else's podcast last night, and it was like 7:30 p.m. And let me tell you, like, that's not the right time for me to be.
Not ideal.
Yeah.
Not ideal.
Not ideal, but hey, it's a great show, and I knew we were going to have a great conversation. So, you do what you can.
Yeah.
Those of you who are listening right now, we are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel, the Communication 24/7 YouTube channel. So please feel free, make comments, ask questions. Love to have you engaged in the conversation. It really just elevates it and brings it, just a slightly different element to the situation here. So I hope you feel free to be a part of the show. All right, Kevin. So I already did the intro. I hyped you up, which I didn't have to do too much hyping up, because you really are an all around great guy.
Thank you.
Let's take it back a little bit. When I read your bio, one thing that really stood out to me, and this is one of the reasons why I felt you would be perfect to interview for this show, because, our tagline, or my tagline, is where we communicate about how we communicate. And I think there's a lot of lessons learned, or lessons that we can learn from your story. So I understand from your bio, things were not always great. And you mentioned briefly about hitting rock bottom and what it was like to hit rock bottom before you were able to pick up the pieces and, put yourself back together and get to where you are today. Can you say a little bit about that time, so that we can kind of have a frame of reference for the listeners?
Yeah, it's very interesting because, and I appreciate the wisdom comment, the fact that I have a lot of wisdom. I think one of the reasons I do is because I had a quarter life crisis. I had my midlife crisis when I was 26. So I've been exploring myself and ego and consciousness for the last 6 years now. So it's been very interesting, 7 years, I guess. But okay, so if you looked at me when I was 25 years old, you would see a man who had a high paying job. His girlfriend was a model. He had a sports car. He had a brand new apartment, and he had the body of his dreams because he had just done a bodybuilding show. So quite literally everything a young man could want. But I was very miserable. I was very insecure. I was not confident. I didn't feel like I had a bright future. I was afraid of my own shadow. I just wasn't well-rounded. I looked really good and I looked really successful, but internally I did not feel that way. One day my girlfriend came to me and said, "Hey, I'm going to leave you because you're kind of a shell of the man that you were when we started this relationship. I'm not happy. I don't feel supported. I don't feel any of these things." And she ended up leaving. And when she left me, I had to look in the mirror and say, okay, who am I really? Beyond having this nice car and this high-paying job and a beautiful girlfriend, who is Kevin really? And that's when I started focusing on understanding myself at a deeper level. Now, there's a problem. I used to go to bed every night and I would say these positive affirmations. I am talented, I am handsome, I am worthy, I am intelligent, and this is the last one I would say. And this year I'm going to make the most money I've ever made in my entire life. The
Mm.
problem, Jen, is I went all in on that last one and I said, well, these other ones can wait. I think this last one will fix everything else. So the next year starts, and I'm 26 at this point, and at the beginning of the year, I get a promotion at my job. So my job, I was in the weatherization industry. All that means is we would go into buildings and make them more energy efficient. But I worked on state contracts. So working for the state, you get paid the state rate, which is anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour, which for me, 26 years old, no college degree, I am all
Right.
in.
Damn good money.
That is
Yeah.
damn good money. I will do whatever it takes to make as much money as possible. So my goal for that year was to make $100,000. So I get promoted to a foreman, which means I start the job, I run the job, and I close out the job. Awesome. That's in alignment with the goal I set. And we got a bunch of contracts that year that were required for us to travel. So I lived in New Hampshire. Most of the work we did was in New Jersey, which is like 6 hours away. I worked in Pennsylvania, which was like 6 hours away. I worked in New York. I worked in Connecticut. I worked in Virginia. I worked in Delaware. I was all over the place. So if you fast forward to the end of that year, I was on the road for 10 months out of the 12 months. Every single
Mhm.
week, I was living in a hotel. I was in a different state. I was in a different town, working out in a different gym. It was a lot, but that was in alignment with what I wanted to do. So we get to the end of the year. I'm opening my final pay stub. I'm standing at my kitchen table and I crack it open and I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. But I had another one of those moments where I said, oh my goodness, I did it again. I put all of my internal fulfillment on external results. And in that moment, I realized that for most of my life, Jennifer, I had lived unconsciously, going through the motions, just kind of going with the flow. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast in 2017. And when I started the podcast, I quite literally stopped caring about my job. I don't care about the money anymore. I know that's not what I actually want. And I know I don't want to do it in the way that I just did it. So I fell in love with this podcast. I start interviewing my friends, having deep conversations like this. And I start calling out of work. I start showing up late. I start leaving the job site early. It's like I am out of here. I just don't know what to do yet. And it literally got to the point where I would have to be 6 hours away to start a job Monday morning, 7 a.m. I would sleep in my bed from 9 p.m. until midnight. I would get up and I would drive straight to the job site and I would work an 8-hour day and then I would go to the gym because I was so homesick. I just could not stay in a hotel another night.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
so bad, so bad. So it kept getting worse and worse. And I was getting depressed. I was getting anxious. It was really taking a toll on my mental health more than I
Mm.
think I even understood. And it got to the point where I was in New Jersey. My alarm clock went off at 5:15 in the morning. I sat up, I slid to the edge of the bed, and I was lacing up my work boots. And I had done this 1,000 times. This was no different than any other morning. But that
Yeah.
morning, it was like there was 10 TVs on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. And it was just like, one is saying, you're stuck here forever. I know you don't like this job. I know you don't want to travel anymore. I know you don't want to do this, but what else are you going to do? Like, you're stuck here forever. If you do leave, what will your friends think? If you do leave, what will your family think? And if you do leave, do you really think you're going to, drive off into podcast stardom? I don't think that's necessarily in the cards for you. And in that moment, I felt like if I took my life, I would take my problems with me. And that was
Oh.
the rock bottom basement. There's not much further to go from there. Now, one thing I did is I used my communication skills to communicate to somebody that I trusted. I reached out to my mentor, who is now my business partner, Alan, and I said, hey, I'm dealing with this. I'm going through this. This is how I'm feeling. I'm scared. I don't know what any of this means. I tried to be as vulnerable as I felt comfortable being. And he said, he did one thing for me that I don't know that many other people could have done. He gave me permission to make a different decision. So he said,
Mm.
Kev, over the last couple of years, your awareness has raised so much, but your environments have stayed the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. So I ended up leaving that job 3 or 4 months later and then beginning the very painful journey of being a very broke entrepreneur. But that's where it all started for me. It started with me starting a podcast based on deep thought realizing I don't want to do this job anymore, and then getting to the point where it was quite literally leave this job or possibly not live anymore. That's really what it got to.
Yeah, that's so incredible. And one of the reasons I appreciate that story that you're telling is that there are going to be many, many people that it resonates with.
Mm,
And I know you had mentioned you were 26 years old at the time. I think that is becoming more common
yeah.
among younger people today. I'm turning 50 my next birthday, and one of the things I have a conversation with my daughter, she just turned 25. And I think one of the advantages of getting to 50, at least for me, is having all of these experiences where I have completely failed so many times and I've been through so many struggles. In the grand scheme of things, now when something happens, I can take a step back. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be another bump in the road. It's going to suck. It's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. It's going to break my heart. However, I know that I'm going to get through this. There is going to come a time where this is going to be the past for me.
Yeah.
And I think for young people, especially today, I want to blame social media for everything, right? But it does seem that there is this heightened sense of anxiety and this pressure of having to have everything figured out now. They see their friends on Instagram, on Twitter, and all these pictures of everyone happy and they're doing all these wonderful things and they're traveling. And then I can see how, being someone in their mid 20s, you could feel like you're having a midlife crisis because you're like, why the hell can't I afford to buy a house right now? Why can't I find that job of my dreams? Why am I so unhappy? And like you said, looking for all of these external things, if you have this hole, that's not going to fill that hole.
Yeah.
Can you take me through a little more in depth when you got to that point and you knew you had to reach out to
Mm.
somebody, you had to reach out to your friend? You had mentioned that. How did you start that conversation? Because I think for many people, that's the difficult part. We know that we probably should talk to someone, but first, like, who do I talk to? And then how do I approach them without feeling like I'm being a burden? Because I
Mm.
don't want to unload all of this verbal, just heavy residue on top of them.
Yeah. I believe something like that starts years in advance. So,
Mhm.
in a way, we had already had deeper conversations than that, or at least
Oh,
as deep of conversations where I probably just messaged him and said, "Hey, brother, can I tell you something?" It was
yeah.
probably something like that.
Yeah.
And I really think, and this is one of my thoughts, and I think this is the reason I reached out to him, the level of vulnerability in your relationship determines the quality of the relationship. If
Mm,
your relationship has a very deep level of vulnerability, I'm willing to bet that that relationship is probably pretty good because
mhm.
you're living more in the truth. So he and I had a very, very good relationship even at that point. And this is the other thing too. I genuinely believed he could help me. He was a mentor to me. So it was, I know if I reach out to him, things will get a little bit better. I'm not saying everything's going to change and I'm not going to feel any pain, but I believe at a deep level, he can give me advice that I really, really need. I
Mhm.
had somebody I had somebody send me a DM the other day on Instagram, and this person said, "Hey, I got a question. Like, I don't know if you can help, but you always seem to know enough
Mhm.
to at least get me to think differently." And what is that person saying? I came to you at some point with a very small tear and you helped me patch it up. Now I have a bigger tear, but we have proof that you and I can probably fix this tear together. And I really
Right.
think that's what it is. So I was very blessed that he and I had a very, very good relationship. I think you have to start very, very small. And it's almost one of those things where you have to proactively put this into your relationship where if things ever do go to such a drastic negative turn, you know where to turn. You know,
Yeah.
okay, I trust Jen, I trust Kev, I trust Bob, I trust Christy. I can reach out to one of these people, but you have to proactively do it. I really think that's
Yeah.
the unfortunate part is you don't know you're going to get to that point, But at the same time, you have to make sure that you're deepening and furthering your relationships for anything. If you're struggling in your marriage, who do you reach out to? You have to have somebody in your corner that you know will give you advice unbiased. They want what's best for you regardless of themselves, and they're not going to judge you. And I think that all comes from a real place of vulnerability.
Yeah, and I appreciate one thing that you said previously regarding making sure that you understand you're not going to fix everything in this
Mm,
moment. But by reaching out to this one person, maybe this one person that can help elevate you just even a tiny little bit. Focus on the small actions, focus on the smaller things. That takes a lot of internal work though,
mm.
right? You had to do a lot of internal work in order to make this happen. Um, how much of a struggle was that for you? Because that's a huge shift in looking at the external stuff. Like, if I make X amount of money, I'm going to be happy. If I have this certain type of job, I'm going to be happy. If I have, this certain level of fame, I'm going to be happy. The list goes on. And I know this is something that a lot of people are thinking these are the things that are going to make them happy.
Yeah.
Take me through that. How was that struggle for you? Because I know that has to be tough to do that internal work.
Yeah, that was the hardest part. I mean,
Mhm.
like showing up and doing 7 episodes a week is a challenge. Like we do an episode every day,
Mhm. Yeah.
but it's nothing compared to the amount of internal work I've done over the last however many years.
Yeah.
It started with me, it really started right after the breakup. Right after my girlfriend broke up with me, I remember saying to myself, who would ever love this version of me? Like
Mhm.
how could I expect anybody to want to be with this version of me? That's when I started doing internal work. And yeah, I started with positive affirmations and then I focused on making the money. But even when I was out focused on making money, when I was home for a weekend, I remember this. I remember I said, okay, one of my biggest fears is being rejected by a woman. Like that's one of
Mhm.
my biggest fears. I can't let that control me anymore. I went to the mall and I started approaching women. And just like, hey, what do you think of this thing? Or would you recommend this if they're at a store? I just started conversations with people
Okay,
because
just ask them their opinion on
yeah,
something random.
simple,
Okay.
simple.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to get their opinion valued. Like that's a great way to start a conversation. And I remember that helped me. I remember
Mhm.
I felt like that was going into me. It was like, okay, I'm getting confidence. I'm getting confidence. I'm getting confidence. Then it got to the point where I remember I started digging into my insecurities and I remember thinking and telling somebody this, I am so afraid of being short. That is
Mm.
such a big insecurity for me. I'm 5'4". I think the average male height is like 5'8". So I'm 4 inches shorter than the average height. Going out to bars is like a challenge because that's not where somebody like me thrives. Right?
Mm.
People aren't necessarily looking for the short guy at the club. They're looking
Mm.
for something else maybe. So I remember one of the things I started doing and I tried to do was I would go out to the bar intentionally and not try to drink because
Mm.
I'm unreasonably uncomfortable, but I know the band-aid is me drinking and that's not actually helping the problem. So
Right.
it all started there. And then when I started the podcast, literally everything became how do I become more hyper conscious?
Mhm.
So it would be why am I avoiding this? Why am I attracted to this? Why did my ego flare? Why did I recluse and revert? Why? I would ask myself why? And that's really what started it for me. To the point
Mhm.
where I was working out with my business partner and a couple of our friends. In the gym, my confidence is 10 out of 10. I've spent 16 years in the gym. But the second we translated from the workout to talking about business, I immediately reclused.
Mm.
And I then this is my inner talk. Why is that person so arrogant about business? Why is that person so confident? Why are they saying it? Why do they say it that way? I realized in that moment that I was making somebody with confidence that I didn't have yet, I was making them the villain internally. They
Mm.
are
Mhm.
bad because they know more than I do. And then that helped me rewire that. So it might be the most challenging part because number one, it's very hard to measure. You can't see how much progress you're making in the internal game. You can feel it, but it's very
Mhm.
hard to measure that. I think the second part is so much of the internal stuff is based in fear.
Mhm.
It's based in I am afraid of what this means for me to the point where I'm still doing a lot of the inner work when it comes to self-worth. I have low self-worth, lower than I ever realized, to the point where if I have a coaching call or I'm supposed to be on a podcast or I have a meeting, if the person is 5 minutes late, I leave. I have stuff
Mhm.
to do. I got to go. I'll send them a
Mhm.
message, whatever it may be. So I had one a couple weeks ago. This person was like, it was 5 minutes past, and I said, I have to go. And they ended up texting me at like 12 past. And they said, hey, I'm in the room. Are you ready to go? My natural tendency, Jen, is to text them back and say, hey, I'm so sorry. I have a rule that if anybody's 5 minutes late, I go on. And then here's the list of reasons why, because blah, blah,
Right.
blah. Versus just saying, hey, Jen, unfortunately, after 5 minutes, I just go on to my next task because I have to remain productive throughout the day. I'm very happy to reschedule. I look forward to chatting. Those are two different conversations. The
Right.
appeasing one, that continues to lower my self worth. If I'm appeasing you, that's me putting your opinion of me above my opinion of me,
Yeah.
and me standing in my own space saying, look, this is how it has to be for me. It's uncomfortable, it's scary, I don't like it, but I also realize that's one of the things that I need to be doing. So to your point, it is a challenge, and I think it's a lifelong challenge. I really
Yeah.
do. I thought when I got more successful, things would get easier. Things are harder than they've ever been because now there's more opportunities that are testing my self-worth, my self-belief, my consistency, my productivity, my relationship. Understanding that, I think that can help a lot of people. When you get more successful, you get more opportunities to test yourself. But
Right.
also the tests are on both ends, the positive and the insecure sides as well.
Yeah, things absolutely do not get easier. I think you do learn how to just do harder better, right?
I 100%. 100%.
And something I want to add on to that, when you begin to peel back the layers and some of the things that you said, asking yourself why and
Mm,
just being observant of how you're interacting with others and your reactions to the situation and to what other people say and to what you perceive to be what other people's situations are. For example, you had mentioned that other person, they seem so confident, and that might be, we may perceive that as confidence, but we really don't know what's going on. You and I both know we can project confidence all day long when we need to. I think you and I have learned how to turn it on and how to
mhm,
turn it off when we need to.
mm,
But then we also know at the very same time, there are still things bubbling under the surface. And that's what I heard, in what you were just talking about just now. We all are a work in progress. So if we can just learn that, everything that we're taking in and what we're observing and what we're hearing and looking at, it's our perception
yeah.
of what's happening at that moment in time, and then our emotions we're projecting.
Mm,
It's going to have an impact on how we're perceiving that moment in time.
mm,
But something else that you said I think is really important for anyone who is listening to this right now and still having this struggle. um, Overachievers do this, don't we? Overachievers, we tend to be incredibly hard on ourselves. And I picked on something you said. You said, I need to be productive.
mm,
Let's 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 peel that layer a little bit, because I know for me I have to peel that layer often for myself, because
yeah.
I feel like, and I worry that I don't extend enough grace to myself,
Mm,
give myself permission to be human and say, okay, maybe I do. Let me take a moment here. Maybe they're late because they got into an accident. Maybe they're late because their dog threw up all over their equipment. As there's
mhm,
a thousand different things. But I'm just like you. My initial reaction is, look, I've got things to do. And, I have places to be, and
mm.
I've got my schedule. Do you think that is something that, um, it has that been a continued struggle for you? Do you have that internal struggle of, I need to produce, I need to produce, I need to produce in order to feel like I'm doing something worthy, that I'm achieving something,
Yeah.
versus, you know what? I'm good. Now if I achieve this, that's great. That's like icing on the cake, but regardless of if I do this or not, I'm still good
Hmm.
with that.
This
Do you
is
have that
such
struggle?
it's such a challenge to
Mhm.
explain because number one, it's so personal. So
Yeah.
this is what I'll say. I believe that for most human beings, your standards should be at the level of your self-worth and your self-belief. Because
Mm-hmm.
or just beyond. They
Mm-hmm.
can't be outrageously high because you'll go through your life just beating yourself up and you'll be
Yeah.
lowering your self-worth and lowering your
Burnout,
self-belief.
probably. Yeah.
Or you can't have your standards way too low because then you'll constantly feel like you're letting yourself down and you're not making
Right.
progress. For me, I don't think I'm a natural high achiever.
Yeah.
I think I'm in a culture of high achievement based on the fact that my business partner is a genius and one of the hardest worker I've ever met, bar none, not close. He works every day, all day, but he loves it. He loves this. He
Mm-hmm.
loves the mission. Nothing else matters to him.
Yeah.
For me, I've adopted a lot of that, but I think it's this. What is the ultimate goal?
Mm-hmm.
I have a very honest, thorough conversation with myself of, Kevin, you have a very high awareness of what it's going to take to accomplish your goal. Either you do that or you don't get the goal. And if you don't get the goal, you do not get to complain about it because that's a decision you made.
Yeah.
I would say that to everybody else. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is the goal? If the
Mm-hmm.
goal is 10 out of 10, you're probably going to beat yourself up more than other people. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you have a 10 out of 10 goal, you're going to have to do a lot more than other people. Now, if your goal is to have a family and a home and a job that you're pretty happy with or that you're fulfilled in, that's different.
Yeah.
Everything's different depending on the goal. So for us, our goal is to bring holistic self-improvement to the masses. And
Yeah.
everything less than that is a failure, quote unquote,
Yeah.
for us, just for us.
Right. Yeah.
That's why we do 7 episodes a week. That's why
Yeah.
we've done 1,200 episodes or whatever it is, because of the goal. So I think it's very important to understand your self-belief is going to dictate the goal. Your self-worth is going to dictate how you treat yourself about the goal. And
Yeah.
you got to check in with those along the way. Honestly, a 10 out of 10 goal is not necessarily good for somebody with a 2 out of 10 belief. That's
Yeah.
detrimental. You're setting yourself
Mm-hmm.
up for a lifetime of pain. Where now my belief in what's possible is so high based on the last 5 years of work, 6 years of work, that now I'm trying to get my self-worth to catch up.
Yeah. And I think that's a testament to surrounding yourself
Yeah.
with people who believe in you and
Yeah.
know, the things that you can achieve. We hear it time and time again. You need to look at who you're surrounding yourself with. And if there are people you're surrounding yourself who don't believe in bigger things, they're not achievers, they're not trying to better themselves, they really just kind of want to sit around all day and not doing anything. Well, if that's what you're hanging around, then it's going to be more difficult for you to move beyond that.
Can I throw
So
a quote in, Jen? One of my favorite quotes or
absolutely. Yeah.
question. And this is I will preface, this can be a painful realization to have, but hyperconscious, we want to understand. Are the people in your life the best from your past or the best for your future? Are they the people that you used to hang out with, you used to go to school with, you used to work with, you used to go to the gym with, or are they the people who are actually going to help you get to your goals? Those are two different lives. And accomplishing something amazing is already challenging enough. Accomplishing something amazing while pulling people who don't care, don't want you to succeed, don't want to see you get there, that's even harder. For some people, that's impossible. So that's a question that I would ask about that. And then I just want to add quickly, this is the good frame for what we just talked about. I call it grateful ambition. I am grateful for everything that I have. I am hungry for everything I do not yet. You have to figure out what your balance is. Maybe for you, it's 80-20. I'm 80% grateful for the fact that I'm loving my life and I'm doing things that at one point I didn't even think were possible. I'm 20% hungry and ambitious for what's next. It all depends on the human and the way that they're set up. I think most people could use way more gratitude. I really
Yes.
do. I really do. But I also think that they could balance that gratitude with ambition. So it's just that it's a fine line of personalness when it comes to the human.
Yeah, I really like how you how you visualize that though, with the 80-20 example, thinking about it is very important to have gratitude for the
Of
things that
course.
we do have and to take a moment and recognize the things that you have been able to achieve thus far. That's very important to have that recognition. Celebrate your milestones, or milestones, celebrate your milestones. But you still want to make sure that you are continuing
Yeah.
to move, to grow, to develop, to get to that next level. I think that's a very important point that you just made. Another question that I have for you, you made me think about, did you see the documentary? Was it HBO? I can't remember if it was HBO or maybe it was ESPN. The documentary they made about Kobe Bryant, and they interviewed him
Mm.
in this documentary, and he talked about, you reminded me of something that he said in the documentary. He talked about how he was in his car driving down the road and got to a red light, and he noticed all of these people that were his same age. He was in his early 20s. They were out having a good time. They were all in college, and it looked like, just college kids out there being free, having a great time. And there he was on his way to go practice yet again.
Mm.
But he said what he realized is that if you are going to be great at something, you have to be willing to make that sacrifice.
Yeah.
And just in some of the things that you just said, it resonated with me. It reminded me of that documentary, at least what he said at that point in the documentary, and that we have tough choices that we
Mm.
have to make. The people that are in your past, the people who are great to be with, they were fun, you grew up with them, you name it, you have fond memories. But are those the people that are going to get you to where you want to be? You know,
Yeah.
Thinking about the goal that you have set for yourself. That's
Mm.
a tough choice to
Oh, it's
make.
brutal. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
brutal. It's brutal. And that's why most people don't make it. And I completely
Hmm.
understand. I
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
understand. I always say so I grew up, I was raised by my mom and my grandmother, and I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. I think I have a weird relationship with relationships where
Hmm.
I I value what we do so much that I will take the mission over almost anything else other than my wife. I will take the
Hmm.
mission over because that's what matters to me.
Hmm.
That's what matters to me, and I want to be on this journey with other people who have their own missions.
Hmm.
And but that's such a challenge because what happens is I've gotten the messages from people of like, "Hey, you've changed. Hey, are you going to be here? Can you be the friend that you used to be?" And I very honestly, and after I let my ego flare go down, I very honestly and transparently sent them a message and said, "Look, I mean this with all the love in the world, but you couldn't possibly understand what my life looks like." And I don't
Hmm.
mean that you're not doing stuff, like, but just understand I'm doing 7 episodes a week. I'm
Yeah.
married. I go to the gym 6 times a week. At this point, I was $30,000 in debt, whatever it is. I'm dealing with a lot of stuff. Like, no, I can't come hang out. There's too
Right.
much going on. I can't, and
Yeah.
that's not aligned for me. So I think we really have to check in with this. Did you actually make the commitment that people think you made? Somebody said
Hmm.
that to me recently. They said, well, you can't create distance between you and your family. And I said, well, I can. I never
Hmm.
committed to I'm going to be this type of person forever. I never made that commitment. Did you? If you made that commitment, then maybe it's time to recheck that. And I understand family and relationships are such a challenge. It's such a hard
Yeah.
thing to even talk about. But I have a belief, and again, you can take this off the rails. I have a belief that what's best for me is what's best for the world, especially since
Right.
I'm pouring into the world. And
Yeah.
if you out there had that belief, how would you live differently? Would it be
Hmm.
the same? Would it be different? It is. The relationship aspect, that side of things, is the most challenging, especially
Yeah.
since many of the people in our lives want to keep us safe. They don't want to see us flourish because with flourishing comes pain, and they don't want to see us have that pain. Or a lot of people give advice based on their own level of self belief and competence, not your own, which ends up holding you back. You have to be very honest. You have to
Hmm.
be very honest. I believe that we have an opportunity to impact the world in a different way. I do. My business partner and I are very unique. We're work. We have a great team. Everything's really rolling. I would regret not trying. I
Yeah.
really would. I would regret not trying more than I would
Yeah.
regret somebody messaging me saying, "Hey, you've become a crappy friend." Like I'm
Right.
sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize. And it
Yeah.
hurts me.
Well, think about that statement as well. Anybody out there, if you've ever been in a situation where a friend or, a loved one, anybody you've been in a long-term relationship with have said the words to you, "You've changed."
Mm.
Take a moment and think about that statement, and really, is that not what life is all about? Are any of you the same person today that you were 5 years ago or 1 year ago or even a month ago? If your answer is yes, then you have to ask yourself the question, what have I done to grow? What have I learned? What have I developed in myself? How have I expanded my worldview? How have I been able to gain a deeper understanding of the things that are going on around me?
Mm.
Of course you have changed. I would hope that you have
Yeah.
changed. So if somebody is using that statement, it's almost like a weapon, right? That statement it's been weaponized to make you feel bad
Mm.
for the things that you're working on, the things that you're trying to achieve. You have to be really mindful of that. That's, to me, that's a red flag
Yeah.
when someone says that to
Yeah.
you,
And
you
from a
know.
place of awareness, and I wouldn't say it this way, but understanding, this is what I would say if I was in an ego zone. I'm
Mhm.
sorry you haven't. I'm sorry you
Yeah.
haven't. Because
Yeah.
if you changed at the rate I did, you'd still be in my life.
Right.
It's that
Yeah.
simple. It really,
Mhm.
people talk a lot about the law of attraction, right? The law of attraction when it
Right.
comes to relationships, you attract what you are
Mm.
and you
Mhm.
repel what you do not desire to be.
Mm.
As you grow and evolve, if the relationships in your life are not growing in and evolving at a similar parallel speed, there will be some tension. That's
Yeah.
just the way it works. If you think of two cars driving at different speeds and there's a rubber band between them, there's going to be tension. Only a
Mhm.
couple things can happen. One, the rubber band snaps and the relationship is not the same as it used to be. Two, the slower car speeds up. Three, the faster car slows down. Those are the only
Yeah.
real three options. You just have to figure out which one is most valuable for you. Now,
Mhm.
if you said to the slower car in this analogy, hey, I'm afraid I'm going 65 and you're doing 45 and this rubber band is going to snap. If you vulnerably shared that, that car might speed up.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
but that understanding is, yeah, it's very important. People, there's this weird thing that when you change your identity,
Mhm.
oftentimes people aren't proud of it because they know subconsciously that they're not going to be in the picture anymore. And
Mm.
that's painful for them. And I have nothing but empathy. I've been there. I've been there. I understand. But it's not that you're doing something wrong. It's that you're becoming something that they subconsciously know that they can't keep up with anymore. And they're going to try to villainize you to keep you small or to get you to slow down. It's just the ego. They're just trying
Yeah.
to protect themselves. They're afraid of being left behind. That's one of my biggest fears. That's one of my biggest fears. But that's why I work so hard. I don't want to be left
Yeah.
behind. I started
Yeah.
this. I don't want to be left behind by Alan because he's smarter. I don't want that.
Right. And it sounds like you also want to be that point for other people, though. You're the faster car right now,
Mm.
and you don't. It sounds like you don't really want to leave others behind. If anything, you want others to, hey, this is awesome. Like, we're doing 65.
Yeah.
We're going to go 80 here in a minute, and it's going to
Yeah.
get even faster. And I want you along for the ride. Let's do this. Let's
Yeah.
do this together.
Yeah.
Um, have you had, being in the position you are, and you've spoken to so many people, and you've motivated and inspired so many people, and that's one of the things that I love about your podcast is you have that goal. You really want to see others thrive and to
Mm.
see them perform at that level that you know that they can perform. Have you had to cut people loose and have that conversation with them, that tough conversation of, look, like, you have some decisions that you need to make at this point. You need to decide, do you want to do the work you need to do in order to get to a better place, or are you happy where you are? And if you're
Mm.
happy where you are, that's fine. I'll leave you alone, and you can be there, you can stay there and be happy. um, have you had those type of tough conversations with people who are close to you? And
Yeah.
how did you get through that? Because I know that's a tough conversation to have, and that's probably one area that is holding a lot of people back. Having to have that conversation about, look, get on board, or just be
Yeah.
happy with where you are.
Yeah. I've had that multiple times. We call that the vulnerable problem solver. And
Mm. Mhm.
it comes from a place of vulnerability. Hey, Jen, I have this underlying fear that we're growing at different speeds. And if we continue growing at the rate that we're growing at, a year, 2 years, 5 years down the line, we're not going to have anything in common anymore. And we're
Yeah.
not going to be doing the same things that we're doing. And I'm afraid this friendship will not survive that. Are you interested in doing some of the things that I'm doing? Because I'm afraid. I'm just really afraid, and I don't want that to happen. That's a different place than, hey, you need to grow. And if you don't grow,
Yeah.
everything is going to crash and burn. The vulnerable piece is so important. But yeah, I one of my best friends, I was the best man at his wedding. I held all three of his children the day they were born in the hospital. I saw this happening. And when I
Mm.
saw it happening, I started having those conversations. And this person would call me all the time, like crying because they hated their job and they were so miserable. And I always tried to help. I said, this is a book. Read this book. Here's 5 books you can read. Listen to our latest episode. You can ask me anything. Like, what do you need? And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And eventually it got to the point where we had a conversation, and it was something along the lines of, look, things can't be the way they've always been. They can't be the way they used to be. Like, this is the direction I'm going. This is the direction our circle is going. We'd love for you to come. And
Mm.
2 weeks later, I think that was the last time I had ever talked to him. And
Wow.
and now
Mm.
I know there's people out there, and this sucks and it's painful, and I don't like this part of the journey. But there are people out there that used to love me that don't like me anymore. And
Mm.
it's not because I did anything wrong necessarily. I mean, maybe they feel like I slighted them, but you have to understand that your example is going to be a mirror for people who aren't doing what you're doing. And
Yeah.
that's just one of the things I've realized is you can be trying to do the most positive thing in the world, and there will still be people who comment negativity on your posts.
Right.
There just will be. I mean, I get that
Yeah.
too. And it's like, okay, that was quite literally the nicest thing I could have posted ever. It's not like I'm trying to do anything bad. Why are you being negative? But I think you have to understand that oftentimes it's not the fact that you're doing anything wrong. It's the fact that your reflection is making people look in a place that they've never looked before and they don't like the answer.
Mm.
Oftentimes it's easier to villainize somebody else than it is to
Mhm.
take ownership yourself. And I try
Yeah.
to have empathy for that. But yeah, I've had a lot of friendships that have just kind of sailed away. And
Yeah.
it's painful. It's very very painful. But I also understand too, if the relationships aren't parallel and in alignment, I'm going to have to be somebody else in that relationship anyway. So I'm not even going to be able to be
Yeah.
me. The
Yeah.
friends that I have that come to me for help and support, I can actually help them because their ego is low enough to realize, well, Kev is really good at blank, 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 blank,
Right.
versus me having to say, well, okay, I'm going to hang out with Jen today. Let me turn off self-improvement. And I'm not going to talk
Right.
about
Yeah.
self-improvement at all, even
Yeah.
though it's my purpose. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in a way, it's almost like that void of the people that aren't supposed to be there. That void allows people that should be in your life to come in. And
Yeah.
you have to have space to create the energy to actually bring those people in.
Yeah, so pay attention to the quality of the conversations that you're having,
Mm.
like you were saying. Think about the quality of it, and do you walk away feeling fulfilled? Do you walk away feeling motivated, like you wanna strive for something bigger? Or do you walk away feeling deflated, and you feeling kind of bummed out and, maybe even a little sad
Mm.
at,
Yeah.
what's happening around you? I think that's a really good way to kind of determine, I guess, the people that you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah.
So it's so important to keep working on this sense of self awareness, to have that internal dialogue going, to think about how you're communicating your aspirations and your goals and how you're continuing to grow and being mindful of how you're communicating with that, with the people you love and the people you care about. This is all a work in progress.
Mm.
What is next for you? Like what are you trying to tackle next? Because I know that this can't be it. Like as great as things are with the things that you're doing and being an entrepreneur and the successful podcast that you have, and you have your wife, your relationship, and you have this amazing relationship with your mentor now, who is now your business partner. where can you go from here? What are you doing? What are you doing next?
It's a great question. I always feel like it's a cop out when I answer it this way, but this is just the truth. We're going to do exactly what we're doing now, but we're going to get better. Really, I mean, that's it. Our mission statement is self-improvement every day in the pocket of every human on the planet for free.
Mm.
So it's like, that's what we're aiming for. So we'll never actually get there. Statistically, it's going to be impossible to do that. But yeah, for me, it's get better at podcasting, get better at speaking, get better at coaching, get better at impact, help more people, make more money, and just continue rolling that. That really is the main focus. So my life will not look a lot different next year, 5 years, or 10 years. I'll just say the quality and the amount of impact that we're having is probably more. We'll be making more money and we'll have more podcast listens and we'll be better. So honestly, it's just the same exact thing we're doing now, just exponentially better forever.
Yeah. So besides the podcast, do you have any authors who are your favorite authors that you follow, or podcasts or speakers who are your favorite, your go-to, when you're feeling like, all right, I need an adjustment here. I need an attitude adjustment. Who do you listen to for those moments?
That's a good question. I'm a big fan of Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn's like the OG, like that.
Yeah.
He's really, really good. And honestly, I like listening to James Clear is really good. I really like James Clear. I like listening to the older generation because honestly, I think a lot of stuff has changed with social media. And I think a lot of the advice people give is it's less valuable than it used to be. Gary V. I'm a big fan of Gary V. I know he's brash, but
but I love it.
Yeah, I do too. He gets the point across. And honestly, and this is what I love about Gary V. I've never once heard him sell anything ever.
Right.
He's never sold anything. I love that. I think that's the way it should be. So I would say, Gary V, Jim Rohn, James Clear. For me, I don't know. I have days where I'm not motivated for sure, but I usually just talk to myself. I'm like, come on, man. Like, what are we doing here? Like,
come on,
let's
get your ass up.
Get your ass up. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? You know better. And when you know better, you can do better. Now, I still have days like this weekend, I self-cared. Saturday, we had a speech and I had a couple calls. Sunday, I didn't do any work at all. I mean, I did a little bit, a very, very small amount of work. But I realized that I need to self-care because I'm burning to the ground. I'm burning to the ground. And to your point, I think the next step is me figuring out what are my maximums. Like, what's the outer limit of my skills? I hit the outer limit of my skills a couple months ago. I did 250 podcast episodes in 80 days, and I burnt down. It was bad.
Yeah, that's
hit
a lot.
The outer limit. That's a lot. Too much. Yeah. Now we're aiming for like 20 a week. I can do 20 a week. 20 a week's not going to kill me, but 27 a week or whatever it ended up being. Right. So it's that. It's exploring what is easier than it used to be, what's more reasonable than it used to be, and then what's impossible now that in a year I'll be able to do. And then it's kind of just rinse and repeat for growth.
Yeah. You just said something and it made me think of another question. And I'm just so curious as to your opinion about this. You had mentioned your favorites, your go-to are the greats, right? The older greats like Jim Rohn. And have you heard of this thing called quiet quitting?
Yes.
Now, yeah. Do you have an opinion on that? I know what I think about it. I'm curious. What do you think about this whole concept of quiet quitting, in the workplace and kind of just doing the minimum and that's it. And that's it. You're not paying me for any more, so I'm not giving anymore.
Yeah. I honestly think it's kind of overdue. That part of it. The fact that I remember I used to work, that job I worked at, I remember one day there was a snowstorm. And I called my project manager and I said, hey, we're getting paid for today, right? Like, I'm stuck in a hotel room and I can't work and I'm not allowed to come home. I'm getting paid, right? And they said, no, you're not getting paid. We didn't work 2 days. 2 days that week, we didn't work. And I was stuck in a hotel in New Jersey and I couldn't leave. They would not allow me to leave. That broke rapport that they could never get back with me. I
Mhm.
think that what's happening is people are understanding, look, there's a lot of places to work. There's a lot of hustles on the side. You don't even have to leave your house anymore to get a lot of work done.
Yeah.
I think employers are now going to realize, look, we have to actually go. It can't be a win lose. It has
Yeah.
to be a win win on both sides. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's happening. And when you don't respect, I'm not saying every company's like this, but if you don't respect the people that work there, when they're making changes, they're not going to respect you either. You're not going to get 2 weeks. You're not going to get any of that because you don't respect them in the first place. So why would they go above and beyond to help you when you didn't go above and beyond to help them? So yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's human nature. I think the landscape of the economy is changing, and a lot of
Mhm.
employers aren't caught up yet, and they don't understand that. You can't lead from a place of fear and scarcity. It doesn't work.
Right.
That's not what we're set up for anymore. There's abundance out there. The internet has made so much possible. And even to our original point, Jen, of a lot of people are having quarter life crises instead of midlife crises.
Mhm.
I think it's because the younger generation is on the new waves of things. So they actually see potential. Podcasting,
Mhm.
my grandmother didn't know what podcasting was when I started a podcast. I was just around when podcasting was relatively new. YouTube, like there's a lot of Instagram
Yeah. Yeah.
influencers. The technology has made careers different. And if you're
Yeah.
younger and you understand social media, you can have a career on social media.
Right.
Mm,
Right. Thank you for sharing your
of
perspective
course.
on that. I don't think that's been a part of the conversation, at least the conversations that I've been witness to, taking it from the employer's standpoint and looking at, look, you have some good people here. You need to make sure that you respect them. You need to pay them what they're worth. You need to give a little because
Yeah.
there are a lot of empty slots and there are a lot of people who are like, I don't need that right now.
Mm,
Um, at the same time, I do hesitate to promote too much the idea of quiet quitting because I just know I feel in my bones if you rest too much on that, I'm afraid that opportunities could pass you by.
fair.
I think that's where I have the issue. I'm
Mm,
really concerned, oh, well, you're not paying me for that, so I'm not going to do that. You're not paying me to empty the trash bin, so I'm not going to do that. And you and I both know that sometimes in order to have progress, sometimes you have to give a little. Sometimes you
yeah.
do have to be willing to do the things that it's not because you're getting paid for it, but it's because it's going to benefit you in different
Mm,
ways,
yeah.
So I just, I'm concerned that that also needs to be a part of that conversation for any young person who is, just thinking about the whole quiet quitting thing
Mm,
that's happening now. And,
yeah.
and, I was just curious.
That's a fair point. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because I'm very biased. As an entrepreneur, I worked a
Mhm.
long
Yeah.
time for free. There was
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
I did was for free.
yeah.
I think
Mhm.
I wonder if it's as much about the money as it is the intention. Like
Mm,
you don't value my time, but you want me to
yes.
value everything I do. I just think it's probably
Yeah,
miscommunication, misalignment,
right.
and intentions, and ultimately whether it's needs that aren't being met. I just think if
Mhm.
people dug into it more and understood, I think it's human. It's just human to human
Yeah,
interaction. We're just missing pieces of it. But that's a great
yeah,
point, to your point as well.
yeah. I think you're right. Who doesn't wanna be acknowledged, right? Who
Right.
doesn't want to feel like that they're needed and that they're valued? In a relationship and especially in the workplace.
Of
Your
course.
workplace relationships, of course, are very, very important.
Mm.
This has been such a fantastic conversation. I have really enjoyed it. I hope you have enjoyed it as well.
I
I've gotten
have.
so much, out of this conversation with you. As we begin wrapping up, is there anything, a last final thought, anything that you would like to share with the listeners? Anything that you feel like they need to know or they need to hear?
Mm. I'll say this is one of my favorite quotes. Your reality becomes the parts of your imagination that you hold on to and pour into the longest. So we don't have a lot of time. Like it would take, I don't know, a month's worth of podcast episodes to go through everything that's happened on this journey. But the one thing that always remained the same is I stayed focused on the podcast and doing this. when people told me it wasn't possible and I got laughed at, and there are days I didn't believe in it either, for sure. But that's the one thing that I focused on and I poured into the most. And you're going to get results in what you focus on and pour into the most, whether they're positive or negative. And in 5 years, you're going to be in a different place than you are today. Hopefully, it's the one that you designed. And that's what I mean by that. Your reality is going to become the parts of your imagination that you hold on to, whether that's scarcity and fear or whether that's abundance and opportunity. So just make sure that what you're focused on is good for your future. It's beneficial for your future, and it's taking you somewhere you want to go. That's what I would say.
That's fantastic. How do we get in touch with you?
The podcast is Next Level University. You can listen to us there. We're on all the podcast platforms as well as YouTube. And then the best place to chat with me is on Instagram. My handle is @NeverQuitKid. Send me a message. I'll send you an audio or a video back, most likely.
All right. And I'll make sure that all of that information is in the show notes. Absolutely. Thank you again, Kevin, for an awesome conversation. I hope we'll be able to do this again sometime because
100%.
it was really motivating for me and inspirational. And I know someone out there is listening to this and you have said some things that they needed to hear. And that's why I do this show, just to bring some inspiration and some help to others. All right, everybody, that is it for today, this Tuesday. So I'll see you again next Monday. You all take care.